Welcome back to Finnish Made Easier. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about verbs. So if you aren't quite familiar with how to put an ending onto a verb, we call it verb conjugation, this lesson might not make a ton of sense to you, so I would watch my video on simple Finnish verb conjugation first, and then you'll be ready for this video. But if you are already familiar with that, then you're in the right place. This will be a great lesson for you. Today we're going to be talking about something I like to call softening. It's also sometimes called different things like consonant gradation or KPT. So if you've heard those words, I'm talking about the same thing. This is maybe used in more scholarly things like books. This is used oftentimes in Finnish classrooms. KPT, I like softening because what we're talking about today is how when we add endings to words, sometimes the consonants at the end of the word will change a little bit. And I like to call it softening because oftentimes it sounds like a softer sound. So I guess just an example of how this works, so you can know what I'm talking about before I show you how to do it, is if we have the word tietää. This is the word to know. You might have heard this before, that if I want to say I know, we don't just simply take off the A and add an N, but we also change this T to a D to give us tiedän. So this is a good example of this softening going on here, is that this T is changing to a D, a little bit of a softer sound. So why is this happening? It's kind of strange. There's a few rules of when we're going to do this. And so first I'll talk about, I guess, when we use it, and then I'll talk about how to do it. Then we'll get some examples in at the end. So first, let's talk about when we use this. We're going to have to look to see if we need to soften every time we're adding a consonant or a consonant-consonant vowel. So today, since we're talking about this in relation to verbs, I can kind of simplify this even further, that it's if we're using one of these four endings. If you remember when we talked about verb conjugation, we kind of had these 6 possible endings. Well, only these top 4 actually fall into this category. These 2 are both consonants. These 2 are both consonant-consonant vowel. But these 2 don't fit into this category. So right off the bat, anytime you're trying to say that he or she does something or they do something, we don't need to worry about softening at all. So you can just forget what we're going to talk about today. But it's also quite common that we're saying I do, you do, we do, or you all do. And if we're using one of these in this box here, we need to soften. If it's easier to look at it this way, or see if we're adding a consonant, consonant vowel, you can decide on your own. But that's how we know. We see in this example, we're adding an N, which is just a single consonant. It's in the box right here. We're adding an N, so we know that we're going to need to do softening. So that's when we do it. Let's look at how we do it. Whenever we add the ending, we're going to look, once we're adding one of these 4, look at whatever consonant was next before. So I can kind of rewrite this and take us through the steps. Let's say we have tietää. The first step always, when we want to add an ending, is to find the stem, which we talked about in the video about verb conjugation. The stem of this word is just that we take off this A. So now we have tietää. So now if we wanted to add this N, we can add it, and then we see that N is in the box. It is a single consonant. So how to know which consonant we're going to change is we can look at our ending and then look at the first consonants that come if we just go left from the ending. So in this one, A is not a consonant, but T is a consonant. Now it can be a group of consonants. We'll use these examples in a minute, but we can see in this one, if we added an ending right here, we'd have TT. This one we'd have RT. So if we ever have 2 that are squished between 2 vowels, we'll still use both of those consonants. But essentially we're just going to look for whatever consonant is first squished between 2 vowels, whether it's just one consonant or 2 consonants. So in this case we have T. We got no consonants on either side of it, so we just have T. Then we can look and put this into our group of rules. We've got our rules here, we got about 12 of them, and we see that a lot of times, like I said, it can change to a little bit of a softer sound. So a double K, for example, will go to a single K. Interestingly enough, a single K actually just completely goes out of the word. You just get rid of the K and you don't change it to anything. But for our example here, T, we can see that T changes to a D. So since we added the N, we look at the first consonant before, we put it in the chart, T goes to D. So we can just take it right out of there, change it to a D, and now we have our correct answer. So this is kind of adding a third rule onto our verb conjugation that we only use if we're using one of these 4 endings. So some more examples of how that works is if we have like auttaa, to help. So first step, as always, we find the stem. We just got rid of one of the A's. Then if I want to say I help, I add an N onto the end there, like I have here. I have to look at the first group of consonants just as I move left from that ending, which in this case is T, T. So we can see these are getting sandwiched between vowels. We have to include both of them. So T, T. If we move over to our chart, we see that T, T goes to a single T. So auta, we add the N, we have to change the TT to a single T, which is autan. For the second example, kertoa, to tell. First step, like always, find the stem. We get rid of that A, we're left with kerto. Then if we wanted to add, let's say we want to say we tell. We're going to add MME, which is constant vowel. It's in this box, so we're going to soften. The first, before ending, the first 2 consonants, R and T. And if we look over on our chart, we can look for it. Oh, there's RT. It goes to RR. So when we add MME, we're going to change the RT to RR. But yes, it's important to remember that this is only for these 4. If we wanted to say maybe they tell, then we're still going to say he kertovat. He kertovat. And we're not going to soften the RT because VAT is not one of those 2 types of endings. It's not in our box, still kertovat. But if we're saying we tell, me kerromme. I tell, minä kerron. If it's in this box, we soften. If it's not, we don't. Another thing is you might be wondering, well, what if what I'm using is not on this chart? Maybe we have the word kusua. The stem is kusu. When we add an N, the first consonant is this S here. And as you might see, S isn't anywhere on this chart. If that's the case, then you just don't have to soften. This is going to be basically all the rules you'll ever use in softening. And so we can just add anything we want. We don't have to worry about softening if it's not on this chart. So the things on this chart are really important to memorize and get in your head. There's a lot of different ways you can remember. I think it's the best is to find your own ways that help you remember these things, but I can give you some general rules. For example, you might notice that S isn't anywhere on this chart. So if you've got like an ST or anything like that, SP, if it ever has S as part of that combination, you don't have to soften. Another really important thing is they all end with a K, a P, or a T. All of them end in K, P, or T, whether it's a single K, P, or T, or whether it's a combination of letters where the second one is K, P, or T. They all have a K, P, or T, which is why this is sometimes called KPT. But if you're ever looking at a word and what you would soften doesn't end in a K, P, or T, you don't have to soften, which is super nice. So it's just these combinations. I would look at them and try to find your own way to try to remember them on your own. One last thing to mention before we go on to practice is if we have a word where the first consonant before the ending is the start of the word. For example, if we have tuora, the stem of this word is tuo, because we get rid of the DA. So if we wanted to put an N on the end there, we'd see that the first consonant is this T at the start of the word. If you ever have this, where the one you would soften is the first letter of the word, you also don't soften. So tuora would go to just tuon. We don't have to soften it, even though T goes to D, if it's the first letter of the word. But that should be everything you need to know. So let's get into a little practice, and hopefully it'll start to make more sense as you see more and more examples of how this works. All right, I switched up the board a little bit. Now we've got some examples to do. So how I've written this out is we have the verb and what it means. I'll have a little area for us to put the stem, and then we can put the ending on. And if we need to soften, we'll soften it right there as well. So we're going to put to learn to I learn, to go to you go, to read to I read, and to feel. We'll put this one into both we feel and he feels. So if you want to try these out on your own before I solve them, then you can pause the video right now and you can just try to solve these on your own. Then I can go through them afterwards and you can see if you got the correct answer. So if you haven't paused it by now, then I'm going to go through it and hopefully it'll start to make sense as we see these examples. So let's start with oppia. So this is a vowel A word. So to find the stem, we just get rid of the A, which gives us oppi. Now, if we want to say I learn, that means we're going to have to add an N, which is inside of our box. It's just a single consonant. So I can add our N onto there, but then I have to look at the consonants right here. A double P are the first consonants before the N. Double P on here, we see that a double P goes to a single P. So we can just change that right here. I'm just going to rewrite the whole word. The double P goes to a single P, so we get open. This means I learn. Oppia is to learn, open is I learn, with one P. Great. The next one, menne. This one is a consonant A. So to do this one, we get rid of the second consonant A and add an E to find the stem. Mene. But we want to say you go. So we see we're going to add a T, which is just a single consonant, and it's in this box. So we're going to have to look at a softening. Menet. We look here. N is the first consonant. So we can look at our chart and there's no N. So since there's no N, we can't soften. So we just don't have to soften. So our correct answer is, in fact, menet. We don't have to do anything else, just menet. This next one, lukea, to read. This one's, again, a vowel A, so we'll get rid of the A. Our stem is luke. Now, if we want to add the N, we can temporarily have like that. And then we're going to check for the first consonant before our ending, which is going to be this K. Then we can look over to our chart. K goes to nothing. Like I said, K just completely disappears from the word. So we don't replace it with anything. We just take it away, which leaves us with luen. You just take that K completely away. Luen. So lukea is to read, luen is I read. Now for our last example, tuntea. Tuntea, once again, vowel A. So it's going to give us tunte as our stem. If we want to do we feel, it's mme, consonant becomes a vowel. It's in the box. So we are going to soften. We have something like that before we soften. That's our ending, so we're not going to look at that. We'll go to the first consonants before the ending, which is an NT. NT on the chart goes to NN. NT to NN. So we can replace those two, the NT, with NN, which leaves us with tunnemme. So tuntea, to feel, tunnemme, we feel. What about he feels? So this one will go from the stem again, tunte. We want to double the last vowel. So that gives us tunte. So we just double that vowel there. And now since it's not in this box, it's not either of these, we don't have to soften. So it's just tunte, han tunte, me tunnemme. So gotta be careful on whether you are going to soften or not based off of which ending you're using. So I hope that makes more sense to you. I know that softening or KPT can be a little bit hard when you're just barely getting into it, but honestly, the more you use it and the more you practice, it starts to really click in your brain and it starts to be able to be recognized pretty quickly. So I hope you guys will be able to do it. Now you guys will be ready to also watch the video on verb conjugation part 2. And also, if you'll be interested to learn about how this sort of stuff works for nouns and adjectives, it's almost the exact same. So I have a video on that as well, so you can go watch that. But if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Like always, I'll put a condensed version of these rules in the video description. But I hope to see you in the next video, and heippa!